Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 152 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long. We are coming to you once again from the worldwide headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia. We are highlighting another great individual who is involved in our community and has served our community for many years. I'm very happy to have Joe Ramey on the podcast today and looking forward to hearing about his journey. Joe, it's great to have you on and welcome to the podcast.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much. Glad to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come share with you.
Absolutely. So, the first question is pretty straightforward and simple. And you know what? Sometimes we don't get off the first question because it depends, So, we've already warned Joe, knowing he's in control of the time limit today because
you give a chief a microphone, I could talk forever.
So, mine and Joe's connection is just in community work, and we're in Rotary together. So I just have a lot of respect and appreciate Joe's service. But first up, Joe, just if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and anything you'd like to share before we get into maybe some specific questions.
Well, I'm a native of Gaston County. I grew up in Cramerton and attended South Point High School, class of '86.
Don't hold that against
Red
you.
Raiders.
This green wave won't hold that against you.
Yeah, during high school, I started working at Rainbow Paint and Wallpaper with Osterwood, Steve Barkley, and Jerry Clemens and their families. And I started in the Belmont store, actually.
Okay.
And that's how I paid my way through college. So while working there, I attended Gaston College and then UNC Charlotte, graduated from UNC Charlotte, where I then got my job in law enforcement with Gaston County Police Department. And then while I was there, during that period of time, I met my wife, Dr. Joy Cole, who's a chiropractor here in town. And we got married. And
A recent Paul Harris fellow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And so then I, while working at the police department, got promoted to sergeant. While I was a sergeant on the road, worked on my master's degree in business from Gardner Webb. And then, we had our son Aaron about 16 years ago. He's out there driving somewhere, so on the lookout for him.
I'll stay parked. So you're telling me to stay parked, right?
Stay parked, yeah. So I attend Parkwood Baptist, where I'm chairman of the deacons.
Oh, wow.
And
I knew that.
Graduate of the FBI National Academy, class 257. Also went to North Carolina State's Administrative Officers Management Program, class 50. And so one of a few people that's done both. And so worked my way up through the ranks at the police department from sergeants to detective sergeant to captain to assistant chief to chief for a little over 7.5 years.
Okay. So for me, my journey kind of started with you a little before you became chief, but knowing you as the Gaston County Police Chief. So that's kind of where I want to take this. So why law enforcement? What did anything inspire you specifically to go down that road?
Well, I have an Uncle Jim on my mother's side who was a police officer at Carolina Beach. He was a lieutenant down there, and of course local officers. But for me, a lot of different people also in the military in my family.
Okay.
So one way to give back to the community, since I was probably in the second grade, I felt like was to be a law enforcement officer. And so that's where I focused, and that's where I continued to pursue even from high school on, the law enforcement career, which was a way to serve your community and give back to your communities, much like the military's, a little bit different, but that's where I saw my path and my career going, and that's what got me there.
So when that started, did you say, okay, I'm going to be a police chief somewhere someday?
This is funny. So when I started working at the paint store, I knew that I wanted to be in law enforcement then.
Okay.
But I was only 18. And of course, in high school, I was really 17 when I started at the paint store. So I figured, okay, I got to be 21 to be a law enforcement officer in North Carolina. So I needed to get some education that would help me. That would only help me. So I started at Gaston College going after work, working on a criminal justice degree. And then the more I worked on that, the more I felt like the more education you got, the more opportunity you got.
Sure.
And so I felt like, when I got into the job and into the education part of it, you learn more about the opportunities that are before you. And so I felt like, okay, I got to set some goals and try to achieve those goals. And so when I graduated and I interviewed for the county police, one of the questions was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, well, I'd like to be a detective or a supervisor or something. Well, where do you see yourself long term? I was told Chief Beach at the time, I'd like to have your job. I want to be the chief.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
And it was like, really? I said, yeah, why not? Yeah. Aim high, see where it takes you. And
listen, we love hearing that when people come up and talk to us.
What better way to make a difference than being in charge, you can give some guidance and some leadership and sort of impact what the agency's doing as a whole. And so that's how I got there.
Do you feel it was more personal for you than the fact that it's in the county you grew up in?
Yeah, I think, when you're growing up here and you have ownership is the way we like to say it. That's why we have residency requirements for forever. Now they're sort of going away because of the hiring challenges, but we always felt like, hey, if you lived here, then you're going to behave and you're going to be professional and you're going to have some standards and uphold our standards. Same way for a person that lives here. If you're working here, you want your community to be the best and you want to be able to make an impact in that community. And so, yeah, you feel like, hey, I own this. I've got to do my best. And so, and you take some pride in that because you are impacting your community as a whole.
Sure. So is it fair to say, when you're talking about your education journey, did you find that your eyes were open a little bit to the opportunities that were available? Because to me, I'm sure when I was younger, if I heard criminal justice, I probably thought law enforcement, you're going to be a police officer or something. But aren't there multiple paths? And
there's so many different paths.
one reason I'm asking, my daughter's just finished her freshman year in state, and she's in criminology.
Right.
And I've learned in the last year, there's so many different
directions
to go.
You go federal level, you go state level, you have forensics, you have, being a law enforcement officer on the street, you have educators, professors, researchers. There's so many different ways to make an impact. And depending on where your chosen path is and what you're thinking along those lines, you can pick ways to make a difference, whether it's developing a new program that impacts a community or creating a new technology that impacts law enforcement or the court system. You can impact people's lives in so many different ways in criminal justice. And there's so many different paths and opportunities, but you have to be willing to take that risk and take those, set those goals and pursue those dreams.
Well, that's interesting. I think it seems like, when you come out of college or your first round of education, you think there's this. I think when I was young, there's going to be this straight path, right, to whatever I'm doing. But man, it's like it can splinter off. And it's never just that perfect curve, right? It's the ups and downs and sideways. And
you may think you know what you want to do at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then once you get started, you realize, I could be a great detective, or I could be a forensics person, or I could be the chief, and so, or I could be a judge, or anything along those lines, but that's your basic start. You got that basic foundation, and then you have to build off of that and be willing to put the time in and put the effort in to pursue that.
So kind of looking back at your life experience, professional, personal, whatever, can you talk about some of the leadership lessons you've learned, or some of the leadership things you've passed on, or learning from, others that you've seen? Because from my experiences, man, there's so many, if you're paying attention, there's so many opportunities to learn from the people before us, right?
Yeah.
But whatever, just between your education, your professional and personal career, just anything you might can share on the leadership lessons that you've learned.
You're talking about education, that's book knowledge, and that gives you some the basics, but it's not really real world education. Right. You learn that from a lot of different areas. And so I've been blessed to have the opportunity. I talked about working at Rainbow Paint and paying my way through college. So many different people that are your bosses or your supervisors that you can learn little things from and apply those to your job. So like at the paint store, that's a retail business, much like you're in. And so it's about customer service. Yeah. And, making the customer happy and answering their questions and getting them the answers that they might need. So on the government side, you're in the same business, sort of. Even on the law enforcement side, they're going to call you're the first face of government that people usually call or face with. It may not be a law enforcement problem, but you probably have the answer or the resources available to you to get them that answer. So I always like to preach customer service. People are looking for answers, even if it's not a law enforcement problem. Get them in touch with the person that can help solve their problem. And they will appreciate that. That's what they're expecting from us. So you got customer service. And then in the law enforcement side, Chief 𝒂𝒔 used to always say, everybody sees the world from where they sit. So you have to, as a leader, sometimes put yourself in that lowest position or that middle position. Even though you've been there, they don't know that you've been there, or they forgot. They say, the boss sees it from here and only here. And then so you have to sometimes remember their perspectives and their views. And so That's another one is, hey,
Oh, yeah.
try to be mindful and be aware of where they sit. And then your people are your most valuable asset. So if you can give them the tools to be successful, they can make you successful. You also let them use their talents, because not everybody has the same talents, and some people are more talented than you.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to let them use their talents and their strong suits. I used to tell my detectives when I was the supervisor, look, I don't have to solve this case. I need to help you solve this.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you solve this case, you're successful. And if you're successful, I'm successful.
Yeah,
And
well,
if we're successful, the organization is successful. And
so is it fair to say your experience is kind of like mine, where I think the hardest lesson for me as I matured in my leadership or is my success. Well, let me back up. You just said it right. Men especially, I think, have to. It's helpful if we have this sense of accomplishment as we're going through our careers or whatever. But then that sense of accomplishment you got to have the humility to understand that if your team's successful, that becomes the mission from a good leader, as opposed to when I was 25, it was all about me.
Yeah. Well,
in my personal success, not
exactly. So you have to be less selfish and understand that in order to be successful, you have to help people be successful and your organization. So, like a big organization, I always would say an organization is like the human body. It's got a heart, it's got a liver, it's got a this. And you tell your employees, if you stop doing your part,
oh yeah,
stop doing your part, and then I stop doing my part, pretty soon the organization fails. It's just like the human body. Parts start breaking down, the body fails,
yeah.
the organization fails.
Yeah, they're connected, right? It's
The
all
key
connected.
the key is you've got to do your best wherever you are in that organization, and you have to understand that you play a vital role no matter where you're at. So, like, you own a business, your employees understand that you've got a lot invested in this. When I worked at the paint store, I didn't have money invested. I just went to work. But you soon realize Mr. Wood, Steve Barkley, Jerry Clem, all those folks have money and risk. That's their livelihood.
Right.
And so you have to give your very best in order for them to be successful, because if you're not successful, you're going to be unemployed because they'll be out of business. And so that's the key, is to recognize that, hey, you play a vital role, and to help your people be successful, they'll make you successful.
So that's really good. And that works in so many organizations and anything you're involved with, right? Church,
It doesn't matter where you're at.
community organizations. Yeah, it's all about those relationships and understanding, that connection there. So let's maybe shift gears a little bit. How would your career, you can't, I would assume, you can't do what you're doing without being aware of community and what's going on around you, not just the specific law enforcement piece.
Right.
How would you, because our involvement together with, say, Rotary is an example, but I know you've been involved in other things too in the community. So how does community play into that for you? I mean, and if somebody's out there listening, who they think, well, my little world is just what I'm doing here. I don't have any big impact on others and other things going on, which I've learned that's false. When I was young, I just had that tunnel vision of what I'm doing day to day, right? So how does community play into that in your experience?
So, well, and on the law enforcement side, the community is your partner. Without the community, you're not going to be successful, as we just talked about. And because you're serving the community, in order to get that relationship, you have to have trust, and you have to build relationships so that you understand what they need, what they may want, and what is going on in the community. The other thing is as a police chief or a law enforcement officer, no matter what level you're at, or even a business leader, you have to find ways to make a difference. Now, obviously, being a police officer, you can make a difference, and you do make a difference. But there are other ways. For a police chief, you have a lot of authority, a lot of influence when you're at that level. And so you pick those areas in the community. For me, I did some partnership with children, least of these.
Yeah.
Red Cross. I've on a bunch of boards and different things. And that way, those folks, you can find ways to help see other problems in the community that you're not seeing on a regular basis. And then you might find ways that, hey, your influence or things you've seen or people that can help solve those problems. And so that's another way of giving back. The other thing is they also see you differently as just a police chief or a police officer or a detective or a businessman. You're someone who's interested in making a difference.
Right.
And we're all called to make a difference. And it doesn't matter what that area is. It can be the boys club. It can be mentoring, as some folks do from Rotary. No matter what it is, that little bit of time that you give makes a difference in somebody's life. And that's a way to give back. And we should all find ways to give back somehow. For me, the community's done so much for me.
Right.
I grew up in a mill village. My parents worked in the mills, so I've been a benefactor of a lot of different things. And so one way to give back is to participate.
And now you've reached the summit being on Gaston's Great podcast.
Man, nothing's great. I didn't realize it.
Oh, man.
At the pinnacle.
Yeah. So something triggered when you were talking there. Because this is something I think a lot of younger people, not just younger people, that's not a fair statement. That what they don't realize is the impact they have on others. When did something happen in your career as you've going through that where you started to realize, the things I do, the things I say, do matter, and people are watching or paying attention? Because that old, setting the lead by example and all that is important. But it somewhere along the line, I started to realize, the thing, how I show up here, how I show up at Rotary, how I show up at my church, how I show up when I'm going, in a kids group. I used to coach my kids' youth sports through First Methodist Church. It mattered how I showed up and what I said, and, and cause they're listening, right? And they're watching what you're doing. So when did something happen along the way where you say, oh, you know what, these people are watching and they're paying attention, and what I'm doing and saying is making an impact?
Yeah. So many different times on calls, you would handle a different type of call, whether it be a missing person or a larceny or whatever it might be. You say something or you put somebody in touch with someone and it's successful, or you're successful, then obviously, hey, we have the opportunity here to make a difference. And then, of course, you see a lot of different things and a lot of different ways that people are impacted. And you say, okay, I know how to get in touch, or I know how to solve that problem, or I think I can help solve that problem because of some of the experiences and some of the things that you've seen. And so all throughout my career, I've recognized, hey, I can help here. I was a mentor once, I volunteered at United Way when I was a patrolman, and started, Barbara Voorhees, as a matter of fact, was the chairperson or director.
Executive director, yeah.
So I would volunteer over there, and we created a little book, a resource book guide for folks that would tell you where all the resources were in the community.
Yeah, that's
I helped start put that together, and you start seeing, and you start looking at those things, and you're like, hey, that's impactful. Or you see kids, suffering, for lack of a better word, unfortunately. And you find ways that, hey, how can I help make a difference?
How can you connect them with what
how can
services, whatever they need?
Whatever it might be. And so that's your goal, and that's your job at the end of the day. And that's how you make a difference, is you recognize those opportunities that fit your strong suits or fit your values, and you try to plug in. Because all of them need resources, and people are, again, our most valuable resource, and your time and your energy make a difference.
All right. So that's a lot there.
So
when you look, well, it's just a big chunk to think about, right? And
yes,
I mean, sometimes that can be scary when you realize that you are making an impact. Like, oh no.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So
you talked about words and people paying attention to what you say and that sort of thing. As a leader, or like for me as a chief, sometimes I had to be reminded, Chief, they're hanging on your word, or hey, you can't walk down the hall and just say this jokingly or pickingly, or you can't say this in front of a camera, or you got to be aware of it, because you're talking about a leadership lesson or whatever. I've been before the camera and said some things that if I could have been a little more specific and a little more clear, it would have been better understood, and it would have created some heartache down the line for me. Some additional interviews, some follow up, and some lectures and things with elected officials.
I've learned one of my favorite little rules that helped me along the way is I call the 5-second rule of I count, especially if emotion is involved, I'll count backwards from 5 to 0 before I open my fat mouth, and it has saved me from saying some things that
5 seconds may not be long enough, especially if it's emotion, because if you make a decision on emotions, then it's going to be a wrong decision, or one that you regret later, and then the damage is done.
Yeah.
And it's hard to recover from that, depending on where you're at. So as a leader, you have to be mindful of everything you're doing. You're always being watched, and you don't think people are hanging on your words, but then
that's my main one of the main points there. You often don't realize how impactful we are.
Yeah, but then they'll say something to someone else, and that person comes back to you, whether it be a a follow, you know, an assistant or whoever it might be and say, hey, did you say, yeah, but I was just, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, there have been times when I've said either here or community stuff or with my children, especially, "Oh god, I did say that."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna have to go back and apologize.
Yeah, maybe I didn't think that one through.
Yeah. So you have to be careful and mindful.
What about, looking back, you professionally, personally, anything, there's a couple of things that you're kind of most proud of seeing, being involved with, or you're accomplished for your community, or just personally accomplished?
Well, I usually try not to worry about personal accomplishments too much.
I understand.
Because it's about the organization, you know,
Yeah.
and the PD. So we've started drug court, you know, with in partnership with 𝒂𝒏𝒔, the district attorney, and Judge Phillips at the time, and now I think Judge Davis is in charge of.
He is. Matter of fact, we're trying to have them
So,
maybe on in a few weeks.
you know, the drug court,
Yeah, I know.
you know, and then
Judge
years
Davis very
ago
well.
with Phoenix and Partners Health and the like, we created a program called, we called it DDAT, Drug Diversion and Treatment or Therapeutic Treatment. And the goal was to create like a spoke, you know, because so many people are impacted from my level. I was seeing or hearing reports every day about overdose deaths and and the impacts of drugs. And you can't, as I say, you can't arrest your way out of that problem.
Yeah.
And as a police chief and as a police department, you have ways to do and solve problems that are different now than just arresting and putting people in the jail, because the jail is its own little mental health facility over there. It's got its own problems and you can't fill it up. There's not enough people and not enough space. So you have to find other ways to solve a community problem. So we created that, and the spoke idea was the client is in the middle and all the services come to the client, whether it be DSS because they've got children that are impacted, or the health department because they've got health issues, or the courts because they're dealing with the courts, and you try to find a way to bring those services together. And we did that. We ran that on grant money and some other monies for a period of time, but we ran out of money. We had 24 clients and 23 were successful, not going back
Oh, wow.
into the court system after that. So that's
a good percentage.
Yeah, very high percentage. And you know, some parts and pieces of that are still used today, I'm sure, from Phoenix and other places. But that was really when you start to realize, hey, you have influence. You can bring people to the table. And so we did that. And then, of course, we partnered with the courts and the likes to create the drug court. And my part was we were trying to get one started, but then COVID sort of started to impact us. So the whole time we were still having these problems. I said, well, you know, I can always take a police position and work with the manager's office and the commissioners, and with their blessing, convert that police position to a drug court coordinator, so that we don't have to. Because the first lesson I learned from DDAT was, if you're solely dependent on grant money, then it could go away really quick.
Sure.
You know, especially nowadays. And so I didn't want to try and start something and not have some financial foundation. And so creating the position under the police department made them an employee, which gave us the ability to keep them employed from the beginning to the, you know, the things that are running good and continues today, as far as I know. That way that, you know, we could say that we're getting it started. So worked with the public defender's office, Judge Phillips and Travis, and said, hey, the manager at the time, Mr. Mathers, or maybe it was Dr. Eagle. It might have been Dr. Eagle, and the commissioners are in support of this idea. And so we're going to convert a police position and create this. So again, and it's still making an impact today.
Right.
And so hopefully the folks that are participating in that program have the buy-in and can be successful. So those are two. And then, of course, we have a new 800 radio system for all of public safety here in Gaston County that occurred under my watch. You know, so there's so many different, I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about, I got a list of them on my phone here that's that long. So you know, I told you I could talk forever.
This is a short form podcast, Joe. This isn't Joe Rogan, who's like 3 or 4 or 5 hours long.
Well, I'm a Joe.
Or Jocko, who's like they're like 2 or 3 or 4 hours. You know, people want to listen to me for like 32 seconds and before they shut me off.
Right.
So what about now? I mean, are there anything going on right now that excites you, that you're fired up about, that you see going on? You know, if our listeners don't know, I mean, you've retired from Gaston County Police.
Right.
I mean,
I'm retired from the police department, and so now I have free time. So I do work at the church some. I'm a deacon at Parkwood.
Yeah.
And so I did some work there for a period of time, and I'm a deacon and serve and find ways to do that. And then, of course, with Rotary, pitch in when I can.
Oh, yeah.
When I got time. So in Rotary, their values and the like sort of follow my own personal values.
Right.
Find a way to plug in there. And, of course, there are always opportunities to participate there. And so, I was asked to take a job here in town as a magistrate at once, but I turned that down. I want to jump back in at the time. So I don't know what the future holds. I think if the right opportunity presented itself, I would consider that. But right now, I'm enjoying participating when I can on the volunteer side, finding ways to pitch in here and there, wherever it might be. And then doing some woodworking in my shop at the house, just to rearrange that the past week, and piddling some there, and then fishing when I get an opportunity.
So, so say we've got a young person out there. Of course, young person definition is a lot of people. Anybody younger than me is what I call that. What advice would you give them? They're interested in criminal justice, law enforcement, anything associated with, that work that you've been involved with over the years. What would you encourage them to do, or are you still encouraging people to get in law enforcement? I mean,
I think it's a phenomenal career.
Right.
I mean, it's
that was a loaded question, but
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, and it's impactful.
Very noble. I think it's one of the most noble
cause.
professions.
It's called a noble cause profession. There's a book on that, as a matter of fact. And so, I would encourage people to get involved in law enforcement. It's a heavy lift nowadays, but with the right training and the right education, I would encourage them to continue to set goals and work on their education, and to take those baby steps to achieve whatever that goal might be. And then once you get to that goal, set the next goal. And work on that. The other key thing is a young person, every decision you make today could impact you later on in your career. So many people go in for a job interview and didn't realize that, hey, I did this or I did that, and that eliminates you from a job.
Yeah.
So I would research what those requirements are nowadays to get that job, whether it be law enforcement or, a judge or an engineer or an astronaut, wherever that might be, and let that direct your path if that's where you want to go. And also let that be a foundation for, hey, I can't make a bad decision, or I can't go do this, or I can't go do that, because it could keep me from getting that job that I've sought so many years and put so much blood, sweat, and tears in. And so, you have to think about it along those lines.
Sure.
But, hey, set goals, work towards those goals. You can set a timeline, but sometimes, things like COVID or money, a lot of different things can impact availability of the courses or classes, can impact whether you can achieve that or not. Don't get discouraged because you don't accomplish it in that short amount of time.
Yeah.
I know it's a 4-year college system, but I worked full time and went at night for all of my education, from Gaston College to UNC. So I started at 26 instead of 22 or whatever. But there's also lessons there that are outside the classroom. When you're doing those things, you're going to learn time management. You're going to learn to manage your finances, and to pick courses and to make a schedule. All those things will come to play in your career in the future.
That's all beneficial.
So pay attention to those things now, because they will benefit you for the rest of your life. So,
well, I appreciate that. So, Joe, this has been a great discussion. Is there anything? I got a few more questions before we finish up, but is there anything I haven't asked specifically that you wanted to make sure you got across? Anything you'd like to share before we kind of close out with 2 or 3 more questions here?
No, I think the biggest thing is I've been blessed to work for Gaston County and serve Gaston County, and it's been my great honor to be the chief or to be a police officer here in Gaston County. I started as a patrolman, worked my way up to the top. You don't get there again without a lot of people having influence on you, whether it be former chiefs like Chief Bowie, Chief Farley, Chief Beach, detectives like Steve Myers, my former captains, a lot of those folks, impact your life on a daily basis or at work or wherever. People that I worked with at the paint store. Anytime you're around leaders or anytime you're around supervisors, you can learn things from them, whether it be, time management or how to organize something or how to talk to people, So I'm blessed in that aspect that I was around a lot of great people, and I want to give thanks to all my family members, and certainly my wife, Joy, who's been there through 27 years of this.
Wow.
So her she suffered as much as anybody
sure.
does. So, she's been woken up in the middle of the night many, many times. So a lot of different people out there in our community, from friends to family to leaders, that have impacted my life. And so, it's been my great honor, and I greatly appreciate all the impact that they've had on my life.
Well, I appreciate those words. I appreciate your, you're saying that about Gaston County. I'm a Gaston County homer, and we have a podcast called Gaston's Great, right? 'Cause
Right.
I'm such a homer about it. But, to your point there, I've learned, and something I try to keep in mind, and I would say I'm okay at it. I've gotten better at it, is every time I meet somebody or interact with somebody, they know something I don't know.
Yeah.
And I can learn.
You can learn just one little thing.
That's right. You can learn from every person you interact with or meet. And that also, I think, just helps with relationships in general when you become interested in what they've got going on and what they can share, right? And maybe you can share something with them too, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can learn good and bad. You don't want to pick up people's bad habits. You want to pick up all the good habits. But they may do something better than you do. I would say, hey, I want to incorporate that in the way I do, whatever it might be, whether it's
Absolutely.
customer service or the way you communicate, because a communication skill is key to being successful. So whatever it might be, that little thing, if you can incorporate that change that you really enjoy or observe in someone and think, hey, I would like to do it that way, you can. Just
Absolutely.
put the time into it.
All right, so a couple more questions, Joe, and we'll wrap this episode up. So, knowing this is a podcast about Gaston County and why we think Gaston County is such a great place, especially with someone like yourself who's been here a while, why would you, from your perspective, why would you say Gaston County is such a great place?
Well, I think, there's a lot of opportunity here to be successful, whether it be in the business or professional arena. There's a lot of growth going on right now. We're close to Charlotte and close to the beach, close to the mountains.
Yeah,
Those are the obvious.
Just geographically, it's a great location.
It's an outstanding location. The river separates us, from some of the troubles that have occurred across on the other side of the river. But the other thing is the people here.
Yeah.
People here are genuinely willing to help you and genuinely willing to help you be successful and want to be a part of that. Obviously, every community has issues, but as leaders, our job is to help solve those issues or
Right.
find ways to solve those issues. But the people here, a lot of talented people here, a lot of great ideas here. And so, again, I think there's a lot of opportunity and potential here in Gaston County for folks, and I would encourage them to give us a shout.
Well, again, I appreciate that greatly. Yeah, and the people here, I've traveled enough to be other places, and I've yet to find someplace I want to go stay.
Yeah, exactly.
I've loved traveling and visiting places, but I don't know. There's something about coming back here. So, one last question, Joe. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Well, my 20-year-old self, I think something I hit on earlier is the decisions and the things you do today can impact you for the rest of your life. So keep that in mind. And then, if you have a idea of what you want to do in life, then research that, set that goal, and work towards that. And don't get discouraged. It may take you a little longer. Myself, like I said, it took me 26 years to get into law at the age of 26, I should say. It can be done, and you can still be successful. Time is on your side.
Right.
Don't get discouraged. Stay after it and stay committed. And you can be successful.
Yeah, there's a great book. You just made me think of this by Angela Duckworth called Grit, and she basically studied. You could argue everybody's got maybe a different definition of success, right?
Exactly.
But what most people consider successful, the one thing they all had in common was that grit, that perseverance, that persistence to just keep going right toward a goal, or not getting discouraged, and being able to just and bounce back.
I always like
from
to
those
use
setbacks.
discouragement as a motivator.
Oh, sure.
Somebody tells you, hey, you can't do that. Sure I can.
Yeah.
Watch. It may
Yeah.
take me 6 months or it may
Yeah.
take me a year. But you turn that around, that little discouragement, and say, okay, that's going to be my motivator. I can prove to myself and to others that I
Yeah.
can accomplish
I like
this.
that question. Well, why not? Why not us? Why not me? Why not Gaston County?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I think that question, that's become more of the question around here of the last 10 or 15 years, at least in my experience. As before, it seemed like, well, that can't happen in Gaston County. Now it's more like, well, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Why can't it happen in Gaston County?
Don't be afraid to fail either.
Yeah.
If you fail, figure out, hey, what didn't work the first time, and let's start all over.
Yeah, unfortunately, failure is the greatest teacher, isn't it? And
Unfortunately.
I should be an expert in so many things by now, if that's actually
Well,
true.
we
But
could all be
yeah.
experts in a lot of different areas if we just pay attention sometimes.
All right. Well, listen, Joe, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your commitment to our community. I appreciate your service to our community.
Thank you.
And I want to just acknowledge one thing real quick. You may not even remember this, but we had something, gosh, a little over 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago this month that happened here.
Yes, sir.
And that night, that very night, you were one of the first people that reached out to me.
Well,
And
as a leader, you experience some things that sometimes you don't expect to experience.
yeah,
Whether it be, on my case, an officer-involved shooting, or in your case, a loss of employees.
yeah.
And I know the challenges that can be. And so, my heart went out to you, and I felt like, and to those families,
Yeah.
because, nobody expected that. And that's hard to overcome. And GSM has done a phenomenal job in overcoming and helping and being, taking it and turning it into something more
Well,
positive.
I appreciate that.
But
But those,
again, as a leader,
yeah.
you have to, hey, I can help.
So, I used to wonder, I say maybe before my father passed in 2018, I used to wonder if when something happens like that, I used to wonder, does what I'm doing really matter? If I'm there for somebody, I'm talking to somebody, I send somebody a message, I write somebody a note. Well, there's 3 events that have occurred in the last 9 years, my father-in-law, my father passing, and then this event here at GSM. It does matter.
Yeah,
It does matter. And in fact, if I've got messages on my phone that I still haven't deleted
yeah. Well,
because I just can't.
yeah.
From 4 years ago, and even from 7 years ago when my father passed, I've got messages still on my phone that I just can't bring myself to delete or get rid of. So
Yeah.
those things do matter.
Again, to everybody, they matter. And so, in my position to reach out and,
Yeah.
I understand what you're going through and the challenges. If there's something I could do for you, that was the whole idea. Hey,
Well, to me, that's like the ultimate community and leadership, moment encompassed in one thing, right? And so, and the community was really good to us and supported us through that. Again, I've said many times, and it's come up occasionally on our podcast here because of for whatever reason, but I do appreciate. So, any last words, Joe, before we close this episode out?
well, again, I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate the opportunity. I think, my story is one that anybody could live. I mean, I grew up here in Gaston County and worked my way to the top of the police department. But there's a lot of other
Yeah.
people out there that are successful.
Well,
And so, again, it's really about the people that I've been in contact with throughout my life.
yeah. Well, the whole point we wanted to, I know a little bit about your story, but I've learned a lot today. But we want to highlight those success stories. And part of the reason is maybe there's somebody out there who is discouraged at this moment, and then I think you're a good example of that perseverance and, the Gaston County Police Chief. So that is something that, that story might touch and impact somebody else. And I know you have along the way, but they may not see it, right?
Well, you mentioned your father passing away. My father passed away when I was 21.
Oh, wow.
When I was just getting ready to graduate from Gaston College, I think. And you could sit back and dwell on that.
Sure.
And certainly it's impactful. I would love for him to be here for me to talk to and say,
Yeah,
hey,
me too.
hey, what do you think your son being a police chief or being this or being that?
Right,
Just
yeah.
to see, because, he grew up with nothing,
Yeah.
and he worked in the mills here in Gaston County, but he provided, and my mother provided as well. And my mother is deceased as well. She died in 2010. But both of them worked hard to put food on the table and to help us to get to where we are. And you have to think about all that. I look back at what they went through and, what they were still able to. And then I look at where I'm at, and I got one child, and they had 4, and you're like, oof, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And so, you just have to stick with it and
Yeah.
find that deep down that you've got the strength and the courage and the moxie to overcome anything. Don't let it take you down.
Yeah, that's a good one, 'cause you can get beat down in a quick
really easily.
Yeah.
Don't let it get you down.
So
Take the time to grieve or whatever, but at the same time, you got to pick yourself back up.
So I typically share a book recommendation or a quote or thought at the end. I got a quote this week I'm going to share. And you know what? I didn't realize how much it was going to apply to our discussion. But a gentleman named William Makepeace Thackeray, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. He said, I mean, it's a pretty simple message. Whatever you are, try to be a good one.
Right.
And the point there for me is, I mean, whether you're sweeping out the back of our shop, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're a business owner, whether you're answering somebody the phone at some company, whether you're whatever it is you're doing, try to be a good one, because you are impacting, you are making a difference. Every relationship, every profession, everything is noble and worthwhile.
Exactly.
And so I think sometimes we think it has to be some grand thing, right? It's the small day-to-day things, like you reaching out to me, 4 years ago. Those things are really where the impact, I think, is made, right? And here it's 4 years later. And matter of fact, almost every time I see you, that's what goes through my mind,
Right.
Again, I'm just grateful for that. I'm grateful for our community and for individuals like you who make it a better place.
Well, I think, like you just mentioned, every role has an impact.
Absolutely, it
And,
does.
if you look at it from that level that, hey, I'm making an impact, and if you want to get to that next spot, then just continue to do that work. But also understand that whatever it is that you're doing, you're impacting that organization or that company or that business, whatever it might be, in what you're doing. They wouldn't have you there if you weren't making an impact.
Right.
And so just keep that in mind, that you do matter, and the job that you do matters. And again, I think for you and what you're doing here, along with all the other things that you and your brother have done in the community, make a difference. And people see that and say, well, I want to be a part of that too. And that's leading by example.
Well,
And
I
being
appreciate
a good community corporate citizen is the best way to say it. And GSM is a good corporate citizen.
Well, we appreciate that. That's part of our mission, and that's something our parents instilled in us, right? The community's been good to us, so that's what we're supposed to do. I mean, and my background as I'm not afraid to talk about, I'm a Christian, and that's kind of our calling too, right?
Right.
Is to go not just, but even through our business, we can do that. I mean, that's part of the point. I mean, to me, for Joel and I, part of the point of owning a business is to be in a position to be able to do this.
You're in a position to make a difference.
Yeah.
And same thing as a police chief. You're in a position to make a difference.
Yeah.
Not just in your employees' lives, but the community as a whole.
Right.
Find a way to do that.
Well, I appreciate all that very much, Joe. So we're going to wrap this episode up, because I think Joe and I, we could all of a sudden be 3 hours and we'd be talking about community still. So I appreciate that greatly. So to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast. And please don't hesitate to contact us here at our email address, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you listen to podcast. Podcast? What's the podcast?
That's a new version.
Podcast. And please follow us on all the social media platforms. And give us a good 5-star rating today, because that helps us get noticed, right, Naomi?
Right.
All right. Thanks again to Joe for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Naomi Hunt and Amy Anderson from GSM Services. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.